There is a specific kind of silence that happens right after someone tells you something that rewrites the past. Not the future, the past. It is not a comfortable silence. It is the sound of your brain doing very fast arithmetic on things you thought you already understood, and coming up with answers that do not match the ones you had before. I know that silence well now. I have spent the better part of a year living just on the other side of it. Her name was Kara. She had been my best friend for 6 years, and she had been lying to me for almost all of them. Not in the way you're probably thinking. My name is Owen Calloway. I was 32, a hydrology consultant for a small environmental firm outside of Minneapolis, and I had spent the last several years doing work that required me to understand how water moves through things, which systems it finds naturally, which ones require force, which channels it carves for itself over time without anyone asking it to. I was good at reading water. I was considerably less good at reading the people immediately in front of me, which is a shortcoming that had been quietly expensive over the years. The job fit in ways I did not always advertise. Water always finds the lowest point. It does not push. It does not declare. It just moves, patiently, in whatever direction the ground allows. I had spent most of my adult life operating on a similar principle, moving where I was allowed, settling where the path flattened out, not asking the terrain to change for me. My last relationship had ended 2 years before this story starts, quietly and without incident, which is one of those phrases that sounds like a good outcome but is actually a kind of verdict. Her name was Julia, and she was not unkind. She told me, in the careful way of someone who had rehearsed it, that she needed someone who wanted things loudly, who had ambitions she could see, who took up a specific kind of space. I thought about arguing, but I understood her point. I had never once told Julia what I wanted. I had accommodated everything she brought into the apartment and assumed that was the same as contributing. It was not. Before Julia, there was a year in graduate school that I do not count as a relationship but probably should, because the way it ended shaped the way I entered every room afterward. Her name was Morgan. She was finishing a degree in urban planning, and she had plans for everything: the city, her career, the trajectory of the next 5 years. And I admired all of that so much that I never considered whether I was in any of those plans or simply in the vicinity of them. When she left for a fellowship in Portland, she said she hoped I found what I was looking for, which was a very generous way of pointing out that she had never been sure I was looking for anything. After Julia, I did not date with any real intention. I was not broken about it. I was just tired of the specific arithmetic of deciding what someone else needed and calculating how much of myself I could rearrange to provide it. It is not a romantic way to approach love. It is also the only way I knew. I had gotten very good at making myself useful and very poor at making myself legible, and for a long time I had told myself those were the same skill. Kara Mendez had been in my life since a graduate program seminar where we had both, independently, arrived 7 minutes early for a class that turned out to be canceled. We had stood in the hallway for 20 minutes, reading the cancellation notice, and then she had said, "I don't suppose you want to go get coffee that is almost certainly going to be bad, and pretend this was the plan." I had said yes. It had been the plan ever since. She was 31, a high school biology teacher with a second job tutoring on weekends that she complained about with the specific fondness of someone who would not give it up. She had dark brown hair she kept in a braid most days, and a gap between her 2 front teeth that she had refused to correct on principle, which she explained once as, "Orthodontists have enough business from people who need them." She was a person who had opinions about everything and stated them without ceremony, which had taken me about 3 weeks to stop being startled by, and 6 years to understand was actually her most careful quality. She only stated what she had already decided, and she had always already decided. "You make everything sound like a fact," I told her once. "I only say things I'm willing to defend," she said. "That's not a fact, that's just policy." She was like a woman who had spent her whole life deciding what she actually thought before she opened her mouth, which meant when she talked, you listened, because she had already done the work that most people do out loud in real time. That was what I knew about Kara. That was the person I had spent 6 years building a friendship with. Saturday farmers markets and terrible horror movies and long text chains about things that did not matter at all and did matter somehow, more than almost anything. What I did not know was what she had been telling people about us. The evening started at her apartment, the one on the third floor of an older building in the Whittier neighborhood, with original hardwood floors that creaked in a specific pattern she had memorized and I had learned, and a kitchen window that looked out onto a maple tree that turned a particular shade of orange in October that we had both, separately, taken photographs of and never mentioned to each other until the second year. I had been to that apartment more times than I could count. I knew the way the buzzer required 2 presses if the street door was being difficult, and the way the stairwell smelled faintly of the curry someone on the second floor cooked on Thursdays, and the way her doormat said welcome in letters that had mostly faded to the suggestion of letters, which she refused to replace because she said it was more honest that way. I knew which cabinet held the wine glasses and which held the ones she actually liked, and I knew she kept a spare key under the second pot on the windowsill even though she had told me approximately 4 times that she didn't do that. She had made dinner. Not a special dinner, just the kind she made when she wanted to talk about something. Pasta with a sauce that required more attention than pasta sauce should, which meant she would have something to do with her hands if the conversation needed it. I noticed the sauce immediately. I sat down at her kitchen island and accepted a glass of wine and did not say anything about the sauce, because I was not sure yet if I wanted to know. "How was your week?" she asked. "Wet," I said. "We had a site inspection out near Mankato. There was a drainage issue in a retention pond that turned out to be less of a drainage issue and more of a foundational misread from the original survey. That sounds like something where someone should have been more careful." "Several someones," I said. "Over several years." That got the small exhale that was her version of a laugh when something was both funny and true. She was quiet for a moment, stirring. The sauce had the smell of something that had been built in stages. A base layer, then heat, then patience. The kitchen was warm from it, the kind of warm that makes a room feel smaller in a good way. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay. It's going to be a little weird." "Kara," I said, "you once called me at 11 at night to tell me you had accidentally identified a song that had been stuck in your head for 14 years, and you needed to share the feeling with another human being." That was important. I know it was. My point is that your threshold for weird is calibrated differently than most people's. Whatever this is, I'm probably fine. She set the wooden spoon down on the rest beside the stove. She turned to face me, leaning back against the counter with her arms crossed. Not defensively, just the way she held herself when she had thought something through completely and was arriving at the end of a long internal process I had not been invited to witness. "I've been telling people we're just friends," she said. I waited, not because I thought it was misleading, it is true, we are just friends. She paused. The word just did something when she said it. I was not sure what yet. But when people ask about you, my coworkers, my sister, my mother, especially my mother, I've been telling them that for years. I have been actively managing a particular impression. I picked up my wine, set it back down without drinking it. "What impression?" I said. She looked at me with the expression of someone who has rehearsed an answer and decided in real time that the rehearsed answer is not going to work. "That I don't have feelings for you," she said. "I've been lying about that for a while." Silence. Not the conversational kind, the arithmetic kind. I did not say the right thing. I want to be honest about that. What I said was, "How long is a while?" Which was not the point, and she knew it, and I knew it. But it was the only thing I could make my mouth produce in the first 15 seconds after a sentence like that. She looked at the ceiling briefly. 4 years, approximately. 4 years. I sat with that. 4 years was not a while. 4 years was a significant portion of the time I had known her. 4 years covered Julia, and the year after Julia, and the year I had spent quietly deciding I was not particularly suited to wanting things from people. 4 years of every Saturday, and every text chain, and every October maple photograph. "You could have said something," I said, and then I heard how that sounded and added, "That's not a criticism, I'm just trying to understand the math." "The math," she said, "is that I didn't think you'd want more than what we had, and I thought saying it would cost me the thing I had, and I wasn't willing to do that." There it was, not the lie, the reason for it, the specific calculation of a person who had weighed 2 possible losses and chosen the smaller one and paid for it in silence for 4 years. I understood that calculation. I had been doing a version of it my whole life. Water does not push. It does not declare. It settles where the path is open and does not ask the terrain to change. The difference was that Kara had finally decided to say it anyway. Something in my chest moved. I could not have named it precisely. I set both hands flat on the counter and looked at them for a moment. "What changed?" I asked. "Why now?" She picked the spoon back up. "Not because the sauce needed it. I think because her hands needed something. My sister got engaged last month," she said. "And at the engagement dinner, someone asked me if I had anyone, and I said no, and my mother gave me the look she gives me, and then I drove home, and I sat in my car in my parking spot, and I thought..." She stopped. I thought about the fact that the honest answer to that question was more complicated than no, and that I had been giving the easy answer for a long time, and I was tired of the easy answer. I watched her. "I'm not asking you for anything," she said quickly. "I'm not. This isn't a proposal or an ultimatum. I just needed to not be lying anymore. I needed you to know the true version. The true version." I had known Kara Mendez for 6 years. I had known her through the breakup with the man she called Adrian with the boat, which was how she always said it, like the boat was a character flaw she was required to specify. I had known her through the tutoring job she had taken to pay for her mother's medical bills and refused to describe as a hardship. I had known her through the October Maples and the canceled class and 6 years of Saturdays. And I had spent all of that time, I understood this now, sitting in her warm kitchen with the smell of her careful sauce and the specific creak of the floorboard 6 feet to my left. I had spent all of that time not finishing a thought. Not because the thought was too small, because it was too large. Because finishing it made it real, and real things could be lost. That was the pattern. That was the pattern with me. I do not push. I do not declare. I settle where the path is open. By then I understood that something was going to have to change. I went home that night without resolving anything. I want to be clear about that because I think the version of this story where the man hears the truth and says exactly the right thing immediately is a version that has not spent much time around actual people. What I did was drive home on roads that were wet from an earlier rain, with the defroster going and the radio off, and I thought about water. About how it finds its lowest point not because it is passive but because it is responsive. It reads the terrain and moves accordingly, and the path it carves over time is not random. It is the result of every individual decision it made about where the ground gave way. I thought about all the times I had handed Kara something difficult and she had held it without making a production of holding it. The year she helped me move after my lease ended and I had nowhere lined up yet. The night I called her at midnight after the Morgan situation, which I had finally told her about 3 years in, because she was the kind of person you eventually told things to whether you planned to or not, and she had listened without performing the listening, which is a rare and specific quality in a person. The Saturday 2 winters ago when I had gone to her apartment in a state I did not want to identify, and she had made coffee and put on a film, neither of us ended up watching, and did not once ask me to explain myself. I thought about the way she talked, stating things she was willing to defend as policy, and about the specific bravery of someone who had decided that 4 years of a comfortable lie was more expensive than 1 night of an uncomfortable truth. I thought about Julia, who needed someone who wanted things loudly. I thought about how I had understood her point so completely that I had never once considered whether she was wrong. I thought about the word just, the way Kara had paused on it. We are just friends. Like a person who has been carrying a word for 4 years and finally heard how much weight it had in it. The next day I went to work and sat through 2 meetings about retention data and a site plan review, and did not retain much of any of it. My colleague Dev asked me at lunch if something was wrong and I said I was thinking through a problem, which was true. He asked if it was a hydrology problem. I said it was more of a terrain problem. He nodded like that made sense, which I appreciated. I did not call Kara that night, or the next day. I needed the arithmetic to complete before I opened my mouth, because I was not going to say anything I was not willing to defend. That had always been her rule. I was deciding it was mine too. On the 3rd day I drove back to the Whittier neighborhood. I parked in the street and walked up the 3 flights of stairs and I knocked on the door, and when she opened it she looked at me like a woman who had been waiting but had prepared herself for not being waited for. "I have something to tell you," I said. She stepped back from the door. I came in. The apartment had the same warm smell of the kitchen. She had been grading papers. They were spread across the coffee table, with the particular organized disorder of someone who has a system that looks like chaos. She cleared them to one side and sat on the couch and looked at me. For 6 years, I said, I have had a thought I did not finish. I did not finish it because finishing it made it real, and real things can be lost. I sat down. I have been deciding for a very long time that what we had was the thing I was allowed to have, and that wanting something different from it was a way of asking the ground to rearrange itself, which is not how I operate. She was very still. I was wrong about that, I said. Not about the ground, about what I was allowed to want. I looked at her. I don't think you wasted us any time. I think we both did the same math and got the same answer, and the answer was wrong, and you were the one willing to say it first. That took something, and I want you to know I see that. She looked at me for a long time. The gap between her teeth was visible when she exhaled. What are you saying, Owen? I'm saying I don't want to keep not finishing the thought, I said, softer. Okay, she said, not like a small word, like the largest word available. That was 11 months ago. We told her sister first, who said she had been waiting for us to have this conversation since year 2, and would not elaborate on why. She had the expression of a woman who had been watching a slow-moving geological event for a long time and was choosing not to say, I told you so, which I respected. We told my brother, who said very little but made a specific face that I understood as approval. He texted me later that night, about time, 2 words. He is an efficient person. We told her mother at a Sunday dinner in February, when the maple outside Kara's kitchen window had gone bare and the light came in flat and gray, and her mother looked at me across the table and said, I always wondered why she described you as just a friend. And Kara said, Mom, and her mother said, I was being polite, and I liked her mother very much from that moment forward. There was a week in April where things got briefly difficult. Not between us, but inside me, which is a different problem and one I had to name out loud before it became something else. I told Kara I was not always going to be easy to know, that I had patterns around wanting things that I was still in the process of unlearning, that there were going to be moments where I went quiet not because I was leaving but because I did not yet have the right words and I was waiting to find them, rather than saying wrong ones. She looked at me for a long moment. I know, she said. I've known you for 6 years. I know you know, I said. I'm telling you anyway. That got the exhale. Okay, she said. Then I'll tell you. When you go quiet, I'm going to ask, and you can tell me you're still working on it, and I'll believe you, and we'll be fine. I nodded. That's the policy, she said. I'm willing to defend it, I said. She threw a dish towel at me. That was the end of the difficult week. The tutoring job is still hers. The Saturday farmers markets are still ours. The October maples came back 3 weeks ago, and we both, this year, did not pretend we hadn't taken photographs of them. We compared them instead, side by side, trying to identify the exact shade. We did not agree on the name of the color. We did not need to. Her apartment still creaks in the same pattern. I have memorized most of it by now. There is a board near the bookshelf that she steps over without thinking. And one morning in September I watched her do it and I thought, this is the kind of thing you only know about a place if you have loved it for a long time. Not because it is a profound observation, because it is just true. She asked me once, a few months in, whether I had been angry that she'd said nothing for so long. I thought about it honestly. No, I said. I was doing the same thing. I just wasn't brave enough to stop first. She was quiet for a moment. We were both very stupid, she said. Thoroughly, I said. For years. Extensively. She made the exhale that was her version of a laugh. I have heard it hundreds of times. It still lands the same way every time, which I have decided is not a thing to examine too closely, only to be glad about. I am still not a man who wants things loudly. I do not think that is going to change, but I have learned the difference between moving where the ground allows and staying still because you are afraid of what happens when you declare something. Water finds its path. It does not wait to be invited. I had confused those two things for a very long time, and it had cost me, specifically and measurably, 4 years. I am not going to make that particular mistake again. Have you ever had someone in your life hold something back for years, and when the truth finally came out, it changed everything you thought you already understood? And have you ever stayed quiet about something important not because you didn't feel it, but because you were afraid of losing what you already had? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one landed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.